Hi, welcome to another live stream episode of Talking Timepieces, where we talk about watch collecting and horology. Welcome to another episode. Um, we will be having another episode next week during the holidays, just because I'm not going anywhere, and figured a lot of you won't be either. Now, Today, today's episode was driven by something that came up in our last live stream when Renee asked about the Powermatic movement. But before I get into it, I wanted to mention that my last recorded episode was was an interview. Hey, Renee, I was just talking about you. But before we get into that, I wanted to make a quick pitch for two things. One was please check out the interview I did with Alex Lido. He is a really smart guy, cool person, and a phenomenal engineer. He was on the team that disassembled the MiG 25 that defected to the West. And his father founded International Rectifier. He is a co-inventor of the HEXFET and currently is the CEO of a gallium nitride power semiconductor company. So he's a sharp cookie, and he's one of the kind of people who has the wherewithal and the resources to get a nice watch collection put together over years. And we talked about some of the more interesting pieces in his collection. I'm going to try to talk him into doing a complete state of the collection video downstream with me because we got some very good resonance on his collection. He had a couple of we had close-up photographs of a couple of nice Universal Genèves and some antique Lacotes. So please check out that interview. It's a great one. It really is, even though I do say so myself. Well, Federico is fond of pointing out how, of all of these bloggers, he's the only one who's a professional watchmaker. Watch professional, I mean, he's not a watchmaker, but he was in the watch industry. He worked for Piaget and he worked for other people. He has a tremendous knowledge of watchmaking. I'm one of the few bloggers that's a professional journalist. So I take the time to make sure that my facts are straight, and I take the time to make sure that my ducks are in a row before I get anywhere. And which brings up to thank you, Renee. Which brings us to the conversation I was having with Renee, and that is the Powermatic 80. And Renee was surprised when I mentioned that it was a laser trimmed movement, and he's like, "Well, wait a second. There are adjustment screws. It's obviously a free sprung balance." And the funny thing is, we're both right, which is what we probably figured during that conversation, that we each were missing some pieces of the puzzle. And yes, Renee is right. It is a free sprung balance, but it's designed to be serviced downstream. It can be adjusted by hand, but it's not adjusted by hand at the factory. It's laser trimmed like the Swatch System 51. Now, many people, myself included, when the Swatch System 51 came out, we thought the System 51 was or at least I did, was the movement, and the effort was to create this swatch, which would be then the next movement for the next generation of swatches or whatever. What I didn't see, and some people did, credit to them, was that, well, I mean, I recognize that the technology would creep out into other uh, watch movements, but the System 51 platform was a technology developer for all of this, which was intended to be used in all of the swatch movements. Which, I mean, I recognize that that was going to be the case, but I had thought that the focus was on the swatch movement and not on the Swatch watch movement and not on the evolution of the entire brand. For example, when the Powermatic 80 first came out, I I thought it was a tweak to the 2824 era, and it was more than that, because the reason I thought it was a tweak is because they went down in the beat. It went from a 4 hertz to a 6 hertz movement, 8 beats to 6 beats a second, to partially increase the power reserve to 80, hence the Powermatic 80, and also to significantly reduce the wear on the parts. Because I mean, you are taking, I mean, at surface math, 25% of the load off of the system, which is obviously a semi-logarithmic thing. Various parts will benefit more than other parts. Uh, but the bottom line is the Swatch System 51 technology platform was there to develop technologies that will be and are being used throughout the Swatch group, and that includes the Powermatic 80. Now, there's an interesting thing about the Powermatic 80 that a lot of people don't, well, even the ones who follow may realize, but may not realize, is that a lot of people think that the Powermatic 80 is specifically a silicon hairspring watch, and in reality, the Powermatic 80 was originally developed with the Nivacron watch hairspring technology, which is still used within the Swatch group. It's their metallic anti-magnetic, paramagnetic hairspring technology. So, for example, just like Rolex has their semi-metallic or mostly metallic, actually, before I get in trouble, I'll just say it's metallic. Um, Rolex has got their metallic hairspring technology that is anti-magnetic, and the Swatch Nivacron technology is based on titanium. It's also a metallic hairspring technology. So they both can say that they're not using a silicon hairspring. But in the mainstream, silicon's a good thing. The average person understands the benefit, and they recognize that they're not getting a hand adjusted watch for $1,000 anyway. So have one that works well, or even at the higher price points. Nobody has complained yet about the Zenith El Primero having a silicon escapement pallet fork, escapement wheel, everything. I shouldn't say everything, but you know what I mean. That's a lot of the escapement made out of silicon, but that silicon is a material. So the Tissot Powermatic 80 Silicium is the one with the silicon hairspring, because they developed that for the Gentleman, the Tissot Gentleman, which is also a silicon hairspring. So this way, Swatch could literally have their cake and eat it too. They've got a silicon hairspring Powermatic 80 movement that you can buy, or there is a Nivacron Powermatic 80 watch that you can buy. And because of the way that it's adjusted, since it is laser trimmed at the factory, mechanically trimmed, it's relatively easy to be COSC certified, because odds are it's COSC certified right there, then and there. But all you have to do is tweak the equipment a little more and take a little bit more time for the machinery to ablate the material off of the wherever it needs to do it to adjust the weight. But a machine adjusted escapement should be easily within COSC, and that's why you can get the COSC certified Tissots with the Powermatic 80 at such a under $1,000. I mean, we're talking about a free sprung balance with a very, very accurately adjusted escapement, with a either an anti-magnetic or an amagnetic hairspring one way or the other, whether it's Nivacron or silicon. And another thing a lot of people don't realize is that the body of the mechanism of the Powermatic 80 is mostly made up of a material called RCAP, which is a copper, nickel, zinc material that is less magnetically sensitive. So the watch itself is actually made of better materials in a lot of sense, which leads me to another aspect of it, which is the materials technology aspect, because um, the Powermatic 80 expresses a lot of machine manufacturing and design. It also expresses a lot of advanced materials, either silicon or RCAP or Nivacron. Um, and it opens up a lot of questions about the nature of a watch and what's important about a watch. Now, when we start thinking about that aspect, right, it comes back to mind about the analogy between watches and cars, because we've got the mainstream automobile, which people buy to get from point A to point B, and they want to do it with a certain amount of style, with a certain amount of utility, with a certain amount of functionality, and with a certain amount of cost effectiveness. So you will see people driving a vehicle that they wouldn't personally like to drive, but they drive because they need a vehicle. Ditto for that person who is, say, for example, a deep sea fisherman. He's on his boat. He's wearing a Garmin, GPS smartwatch, and he's got all kinds of other gear, but he's wearing a good, robust, intelligent watch on his wrist because he's got to do business. And maybe when he goes home, he either takes the watch off and doesn't wear anything, or he puts on a gilet coat moon phase and a jacket and goes out and has drinks at the golf club. Um, that's the nice thing about watches. Everyone has a different taste. But at that point, obviously, the Garmin isn't touting its movement, but the Gilet coat is, and that hypothetical person, which is not an unbelievable hypothesis, to have a Garmin as your daily wear beater and have a Gilet coat moon phase as your evening and party watch. Um, and the fact is that people will gladly spend money on both and do, but the movement is more important in one than in the other, right? So at what point does the movement become important? At what point is how the movement is made become important? Um, a lot of this has been brought into sharp focus because of the quartz crisis and the whole aspect of what makes a watch. And the old trilogy is face, case, and movement. So, pardon me, drinking the Augustiner Edelstoff again. As I've mentioned before, it's my favorite bottled beer that I can get locally. If they had some nice spot, and um, I might drink that instead, but I can't. There's not a spot and distributor. Maybe I should look into that. But there's not a spot and distributor in the neighborhood, so no spot and handy, or maybe there is, and I haven't come across it. I'll have to look deeper. But beer aside, back to watches. But then again, wait a second. Thinking about beer, it's another case where the mainstream, they care a little bit about quality, but they're not going to care if it's 2 row or 4 row hops, or if they're local hops, or if they're European hops, or if the barley is. I know this. The 2 row and the 4 row is about, I think, the barley, because I used to sell beer years and years and years ago in an old incarnation of myself, and I learned all that stuff. Um, but there are people who care more about how the beer is made than how the beer tastes and what it's doing for them, because a lot of people are just happy to go to a bar and order whatever the light beer is over the counter because they want to chat with their friends and they're looking for something to drink. Same thing with watches. There are people who need watches. I was in a local bar. As some of you know, I live in Wiesbaden, Germany, which is also a very large military base, relatively speaking, compared to the old Cold War days. I came here originally back in the old-timey days when it was a lot of military. But I was chatting with an old guy who was wearing a Timex, and I was, uh, impressed. I'm like, "Hey, cool, basic, clean timepiece," because it was a straight up three-hander, white face, black hands Timex. And he goes, "I have to because they won't let me wear a smartwatch into the skiff, which is secure. It's a secure facility. So he's either, like working with the radio equipment or communication stuff, or I'm not going to speculate. It doesn't matter. But the thing is that they don't let you take smart devices into secure facilities. And so he wore a simple mechanical watch because that was his only choice. So mechanical watches have their utility in a lot of ways. Maybe you want to have a watch that you can take on a long trip and not worry about having to replace the battery. Or maybe you want something that uh, just, yeah, you just don't like electronics and you want something that's not electronic. The Wiccan in you likes the way that the hands mirror the movement of the stars and the moon and the sun and all, because it does, which is an elegant thing about a watch with analog hands. Although I do have a digital face G-Shock. I occasionally bring in a digital watch when I think I need a beater for, the zombie apocalypse. And I thought, okay, let me get a solar powered radio controlled G-Shock. And then I can say I have something that'll work no matter what. And it will, So everybody buys watches for different reasons. So how important is the movement to you? Let's see. Robert, Spring Drive is very advanced, but I never bought a Seiko except for a gift because their case design is not artistic looking. Well, Robert, that's something that I had brought up in an earlier issue, that Seiko makes great pieces, but they lack a unique design language. You know what I mean? Rolex, you could look across the room and see a sub, or it's something that's pretending to be a sub, but you can look across the room and see a sub, that's a sub. You can look across the room and see an Explorer, that's an Explorer, an Explorer 2. You can see every single model Rolex, any one of you can identify from across a room. Some watches you can identify from across the room. A Jaeger Cote Reverso, you can identify from across the room. Audemars Piguet Royal Oak, you can recognize from across the room. I often confuse the Nautilus and the other one. I'm blanking for half a second here. It'll come to me. But I often confuse those guys because they have similar case shapes, although one's a rubber strap and one's an integrated strap. But yeah, the Seikos lack a unified design language beyond very cool faces. But the problem with very cool faces, there are other companies that make very cool faces as well. So again, Seiko needs a good, interesting, yet not tiring to the eyes, right? Because you can have a very aggressive case design. And like Boulder has a very aggressive case design, and some people like it and some people don't. I mean, I think it's a cool one for a younger person because it's a very aggressive, angular, chunky design. But if I'm going to go with something like that, there are other watches that do it a little bit better, like a Tudor North Flag, for example. What are your thoughts? G-Shock is artistic looking. Robert, you're absolutely right. The G-Shock and the latest one, the Oak, the G Oak, the Cassie Oak with the analog hands, and I think, it has an analog hand day of the week pointer, which I think is a cute and elegant, touch. Wristwatch check. I'm wearing my Universal Genève. Let's see if I can get this thing in focus. I guess it's because it's not that much contrast in the face because it's a light colored face. But this is my Universal Genève Senna, which is interesting because it's almost a great watch. It's a good watch. It's almost a great watch. But it's essentially a COSC certified Valjoux 7750, totally undecorated. I have a video. I open up the back and show it. But it is a straightforward, plain vanilla, certified Valjoux 7750 in a waterproof steel case with screw down pushers and an interesting design. But as the last attempt of relevancy from Universal Genève, it fell short. Oh, by the way, it was the Aquanaut. I don't know why I blanked on the Aquanaut, but that was what it's called. I often confuse the Aquanaut and the Nautilus at a distance because that's mostly because you can't see the ears from a distance, and unless you're looking closely, you don't really notice the case shape. So, but then again, nobody cares if they're wearing a Patek because by the time you get close enough, you know exactly what it is. But then again, with the Seiko, you got to get right on top of it before you even recognize it's a Seiko. So yeah, they need something. They need some interesting design DNA, some quirky design language that helps it work, which is another case with this. They were trying to shoot for some design language here. And if it had been a successful piece, you probably would have seen a lot of stuff with these kind of carbon fiber accents. It's like a carbon filled plastic. It's not really a carbon fiber. And the black links aren't load bearing. They're just screwed on to the faces of the metal links. So, like I said, this really could have been a contender. It's a nice looking watch, but yeah, it's currently my mechanical beater. Um, Although to say, $1,000, I mean, even all said and done, it's still worth between 1,000 and 1,500. So, it's not a pathetic loser watch. It's just a good value 7750 base waterproof watch with screw down crown pushers that is really, really trying to be something. But unfortunately, it didn't. And Universal Genève sadly is not a company currently making watches, as far as I know. Let's see. Oh, Renee put Aquanaut here. Yes, I didn't see that before I said Aquanaut. I'm not totally senile yet. Just sometimes I'm thinking of what I'm going to say, and then I can't remember what I'm trying to say at that exact moment. If you know what I'm trying to say there. So, the Royal Oak is the most artistic of all time. Well, the thing about the Royal Oak, right, was Gerald Genta. If you look into him, I've looked into some of his stuff because his fingers are on a lot of designs that you don't realize. Like he did a lot of work with Omega. He was those claws that are on the constellation. He created those because in the original constellation, which is also, by the way, I believe that's why they call it the double eagle. It came up in an earlier conversation, and I researched it. But those claws were originally, I mean, I knew the claws, why they were originally the used part, but the double eagle part I had to research. But the those claws were originally used to hold the case together. That generation constellation was made so small, and it was made without a bezel, so they were literally C clamps, gold C clamps that held the case together, and they're carried on today as design cues to harken back to that, but they no longer hold the case together. But the first generation claws on the constellation actually held the case together, and that was a Genta design. And the Paipan on the Omegas, now the Globemaster has a Paipan, and I believe the new Speedmaster has a hint of a Paipan, but the Globemaster, the new Globemaster, has a Paipan dial, and I have the annual calendar. I have a video on it. It's worth looking at. It's a beautiful, beautiful watch. Um, and Genta also did the Polaris with the Omega Polaris, Seamaster Polaris, which was a titanium case. I have a video on that as well, a titanium cased watch. They also made it in steel, but the interesting thing is it had a gold inlay. It wasn't plated or anything. They literally inlaid a gold frame around the bezel. Very interesting looking piece. But the Royal Oak, the thing about the Royal Oak is that he was approached to remake the watch, right? The other designs he made up to that point were evolutions of various designs. He needed to make the constellation look different from the Datejust, so he created a dramatic Paipan dial with dramatic indices so that you could tell at a glance that it wasn't a Rolex, that it was an Omega. Actually, back then, I don't think he really cared that much about it because Omega was number one and Rolex was number two. But still, he wanted to make it look different from everybody else's watch, which is why you hire designers. And the Paipan dial, the first generation constellations with the Paipan dial and the very dramatic, complicated shapes that they use for the indices are really striking watches. So Gerald Genta's fingerprints are all over Omega and all over a lot of other companies. And so when Audemars Piguet approached him to remake the watch to help save the company, to help, I mean, I don't know if they told him the future of everything is lying on your shoulders. That'd be a lot of pressure for somebody to take. But I do believe that he knew that he was making something new. He was the team building the Corvette. He was the team making the Mustang. He was doing something different than he needed to freshen it all up. And he hit it out of the park The Royal Oak is a phenomenal design. It really is a beautiful uh, piece of machined steel, and it unfortunately Spocked them, right? Leonard Nimoy, Spock, in that sense of being typecast. They can't make anything that doesn't look like the Royal Oak. They just recently came out with a line of beautiful pieces, and everybody crapped all over them because they didn't look like the Royal Oak. And then they complain that Audemars Piguet is not being original enough, different. And then they come out with something different, and they say, "Hey, why are you doing something different?" Go figure. But the Royal Oak is a gorgeous design. And one of the many that are not directly homaged by the competitors, but there are a lot of watches that look suspiciously like the Royal Oak, if you know what I mean. Um, Renee, formerly the design of the watch was important. The case, the dial, the outside. Nowadays, the inside seems to be more important, and everyone is asking for in-house movements. Well, Renee, I was saying, face, case, and movement. The mainstream are still looking at the face and case. The watch enthusiast crowd, because I won't call them collectors by necessarily, because you may only have one watch for years and years and years. When I was like working for, well, I still work for a living, but I'm almost at, I can see retirement in the, and I have enough saved so I don't feel weird. um, but when I was young and worried about money, and when I had kids that I was trying to raise and all that other stuff, I only had one watch. I had the nicest watch I could afford, but I only had one watch. But I loved watches, and my seventh grade science fair project went to state was about timekeeping. But I didn't have the resources. I didn't have. I did. My current collection is based on a car I sold about 5 years ago, and I took the cash and I just put it into watches and started, up collecting, as it were. But when it comes to why people buy watches, as I pointed out earlier, there are people who are wearing, like I said, a Garmin, or they're wearing a G-Shock, or they're wearing something, and those watches are nice on the outside, right? I mean, the Casio, okay, it's nice on the inside to the sense that it's well made as a quartz watch, but no one's like doing a skeleton G-Shock, or well, maybe somebody is, but you never know in the art world. But people aren't buying G-Shocks with display backs so they can admire the movement, but they are buying them. So I would say, Renee, yes, in one sense, you're right. The enthusiast crew wants to see the movement. They're paying for mechanical and they want to see it. And that's why more and more people are moving to display backs. And it has tiered. You've got watches, which are just stuff, right? And then you've got, well, here, I got my trusty whiteboard here. Let's take the whiteboard and make a quick and dirty, scale. And I'm not going to try to put companies into these scale, because the thing about it is that I was looking at various scales, and depending on what watch you're looking at, some of these watches are phenomenal, right? And some of the watches aren't. Even at the higher end, you've got companies that have off the shelf movements at the mainstream, and then their top of the line is a really great watch. I'm looking at you, Tag Heuer. I've got a Carrera 2 myself, in-house chronograph column wheel. But they've got a lot of mainstream stuff as well. But there's nothing wrong with that. I think the problem is that the big problem is the break, right? So here we go. So we've got watches, right? Stuff. And that includes like fashion watches and stuff like that. And then you've got, collectible watches, I'll say. Actually, I'm going to stop using this because I'm facing away from the camera and all. Just going to talk to you all, and if the lack of graphics is a problem, maybe I'll add some later. But basically, you've got watches, generic watches, whether it's a smartwatch or a quartz watch or a cheap mechanical watch because you need to wear a cheap mechanical watch. And then you've got um, the mainstream collectible watches. Some would call entry level luxury, but as a lot of you know, I don't like to say entry level. You can call it starter luxury. You can call it budget luxury. You know, some would say that a Tissot PRX is not a luxury watch, but it's still a what, $700, $800 watch. That's a life changing amount of money for some people. That's a lot of money. Um, Now, someone who's wearing, say, a $6,000 watch may go, "Oh, well, I wouldn't wear that." But just because you wouldn't wear it doesn't mean that you can crap all over it. You know, it's still an expensive watch by a lot of people's terms. So, you know, once you're in the mainstream of collectible watches, because I would say the PRX is totally a collectible watch. It represents this Powermatic 80 technology. It represents a great deal of things, which is why they can offer such a phenomenal watch for under $1,000 because it incorporates these technologies. So that's a collectible watch, I would say. So I would call them mainstream collectible watches, and that goes up to say about the $5,000 to $7,000 point because you're talking about at that range a Seamaster or some other really nice watches that some luxury people would say no, that's an entry level watch, which like I said I don't agree with. But you have that problem. And then, of course, beyond that, you have luxury. And then, which is what Rolex is trying to be. Rolex used to be mainstream collectible, and they're trying to become luxury, yet they don't have hand finished movements. They don't have integrated bracelets in any of their watches that I know of off the top of my hand outside of the Oyster Quartz. And yeah, they don't even have a display back to show the movements they have, and yet they're trying to compete with, the Nautilus, and they're trying to compete with the Royal Oak, and they're trying to compete with the Aquanaut, and they believe that they're, at the same price point value, and I don't agree. I mean, I'm not saying they don't make great watches. I own a Explorer 2, and I've gone through that journey, before. I have a love-hate relationship with the company. I should say I should have a dislike relationship. I don't hate them and I don't love them. But I do think they make great watches. And the company Rolex is uh, a great watchmaker. Tudor is doing fantastic stuff. But Rolex, the brand, I think, is slipping in their quest to become luxury because beyond their name and their reputation. If you took the name off of it and put it up next to a Patek Philippe, there wouldn't be a. I mean, you put it up against a Jaeger-LeCoultre. The Jaeger-LeCoultre Polaris chronograph is thinner than a Daytona and has a better finished movement, which you can see through the back. Hand finished movement, hand finished case, and yet people would think that, and it does cost more. A Daytona does cost more than a Jaeger-LeCoultre Polaris chrono. Um, so that's the biggest problem is movements are important, but at what point does the movement not become important? In one sense, at the high end, movement that becomes less important because if Rolex can say that the Daytona is as good as the Royal Oak because the case is finished as well, and the bracelet, because everyone talks about Rolex bracelets, right? Last time I checked, bracelets don't tell time. So no matter how fantastic that clasp is, no matter how wonderful the bracelet is, no matter how supple it feels, if the watch is not of a caliber for the price that you're paying for it, someone is being taken advantage of. And I admit that I paid too much for my Explorer 2, but I believed it was the least screwing I would get buying a new I mean, not a new, but buying an Explorer 2 again. And I got it at a good price, and it's already actually worth more than I paid for it. So because the price is just keeps going, so I'm not even worried about what I paid for the Explorer 2 anyway. But if people are worried more about the clasp than they are about the escapement, then where do you start the conversation there? Let's see. Wow, I wanted to get the Constellation, that's why it looks so amazing. See, Robert, exactly. Oh, and if you could pick up a nice like, for example, if you picked up a nice vintage Constellation, like a man's Constellation back then was like a 34 millimeter, which is a perfect size for a lady's dress watch or a men's dress watch. Don't forget, dress watches are expected to be smaller and diminutive. They're supposed to be elegant and discreet. So that's if you have a vintage, 34 or 36, that's a good place to wear it if you have a big wrist. I used to have a couple of 36s, including an oyster quartz, but I sold them because, yeah, the smallest I can really wear on my wrist and get away with it without feeling weird is a 38. But I like my sweet spot is about 40. The biggest I'll wear comfortably is a 44, and the smallest I'll wear comfortably is a 38. But yeah, get a Constellation, and the new ones. Get her a new one too. The new ones are beautiful, and they've got their newest movements in them, which are fantastic. Anti or amagnetic movements. Coaxial is very solid. Recently bought a Seamaster. Yes, it is exactly PAL. PAL. Um, I have the I have a couple of coaxial movements. My Globemaster annual calendar is a coaxial movement, and my Seamaster GMT is a first generation coaxial. So it's a modified ETA coaxial movement, not an in-house coaxial. So I actually straddle the generational gap between the last generation of the ETA movements, modified for coaxial, to the new generation of movements that are straight coaxial. So that watch will serve you long and well. One of the interesting things about the coaxials, if you listen to them, they it's more of a thudding than a ticking because the way the levers are, it's more of a sliding than a hitting. So they tick, but the ticking does sound differently, almost more organic. Interestingly enough, like a beating heart, closer to that. It's very interesting to hear a coaxial movement tick versus a regular standard escapement movement ticking, or any other reduced friction escapement. Let's put it that way. Um, would you choose a hot wife or a smart wife? I would choose a hot, smart wife, because the beautiful thing about beauty is it's in the eye of the beholder. And so if you fall in love with this woman, she will become beautiful in your eyes. And worst case scenario, you could give her like some beauty shop gift coupons and buy her some really nice clothes. But unless she's comfortable in her skin, she's not going to feel beautiful. And so the best thing to do is find a woman and make her feel beautiful because you love her, and then she will find ways to make herself beautiful to you. So, hot wife with a smart watch. That's a good one, pal. Um, well, the funny thing is that I'd rather just have a good smartphone. I know there are people who double wrist and they wear a smartwatch, or I would, if I really needed it for the monitoring, I would go with like a Fitbit or something that doesn't have a big display, or a narrow smartwatch to wear as like a bracelet for the monitoring aspect, and then continue to use my phone for all of the user interface and display stuff. Because, yeah, I mean, well, I'm obviously an old geezer anyway, so I'm wearing, being a old watch guy. I don't mind being considered out of the loop for not having the stuff directly on my wrist. I tried that. I still have my Google Glass, and if you look, there's some stuff I've did on YouTube for other publications I worked with, where I used it at trade shows to take videos and the like. But you know, just because you can have an immersive digital experience 24/7 doesn't mean you should. And the elegance of a watch with hands that you can just glance at and know what time it is, and or at least for someone who grew up with it, I'd just rather wear a watch. Just, that's me. Everyone's got their own tastes, and I'm hoping the people that watch this show are people that enjoy watches with hands and watches with mechanical movements and watches with a little bit of character and design and style. Um, because at the end of the day, that smartwatch is just going to be another piece of dead electronics in your drawer in a few years. Where the mechanical watch you buy today, that Tissot PRX Powermatic 80, you could give it to your grandkids and they could wear it and say, they used to really use this to tell time. Would you believe that? They show up for work based on this thing, work. What the hell is that? But yeah, mechanical watches, I believe, will always have a market because there are people who appreciate well-made things, and mechanical watches represent the best of the last generation of technology, in my humble opinion. Or not so humble opinion. I'm quite an arrogant asshole sometimes. I said asshole. Don't pardon the word. Um, let's see. Now you got to shop for the next upgrade. Okay, yes, this is also true. Well, right, the movement is important to stand the test of time, Robert. In a mechanical watch, the movement is important. I agree with you wholeheartedly. And that's the thing is that so once you have a mechanical movement in a watch today, right? There are a lot of cheap watches with mechanical movements in them, but once you're talking about a mechanical watch in an electronic world, even a cheap mechanical watch is something different and special because the person had a conscious decision not to wear an electronic device in a world that is awash with not only electronic devices, but the functionality to make them useful. Um, you know, the Internet of Things and the cloud and all of that other stuff. You can do quite a lot with a smart wearable device. And to wear a mechanical watch is a statement, as I was saying earlier. So, I mean, yes, I can do it all. Yes, I can do it all from a phone, but it's easier to do it from a watch. It's more convenient to do it from a watch in some ways. Just as I look and glance to see the time, some people can look and glance to see instant messages to keep meetings rolling and things along those lines. So, I mean, I'm not saying that I say don't wear a smartwatch. Wear a smartwatch if that's what you choose to wear. But if you choose to wear a mechanical watch, pardon me, if you choose to wear a mechanical watch, wear something that's worth it. And if it's cheap, get it because it's inexpensive, not because because it's cost effective. Like a Vostok Amphibia is a cheap watch, but it's not a cheap watch. A Vostok Amphibia is well worth the money that you pay for it, and you can get one for under $100, and it will last you forever. And it's a mechanical watch that can um, be serviced, and it is a mechanical watch that has a personality and a flair, and it has a history. The whole company has a history. In fact, talking about that interview that I had with Alex Leto, he almost bought the Poliot Watch Company during the time of the end of the Cold War, right around the end of the Cold War. To figure out why he didn't and what happened, you're going to have to check out the interview. Let's see. I have an OP39. It loses about 3 seconds a day. Well, pal, the nice thing about the OP39 and the Rolex movements is to regulate them isn't difficult. They're very well made and elegantly designed movements in that sense. And your local authorized Rolex dealer, their in-house watchmaker, can do it right there in the building. They don't have to send it anywhere to regulate it. If you take it to an authorized dealer, they'll even do it the way Rolex wants them to do it. So no, yeah, take it in. I had an OP39, but as like I was talking about, getting rid of my Rolexes and all, and I did wind up getting the Explorer 2 again. But I think that's because, in my mind, the Explorer 2 is their last real tool watch. Everything since and I'm not talking about the new one, I'm talking about the 16570. Everything since, that time has been them trying to be a luxury watch company. And the Explorer 2 represents, in my mind, why people made Rolex famous in the first place. Let's see. Yeah, I do think, go ahead and take it in to have it regulated, pal. It is a good idea if you take it to a Rolex dealer. If you're gonna take it into someone who's not a Rolex an authorized Rolex dealer, if they're a good watchmaker, they'll do a good job. Um, but or, look at a whole bunch of YouTube videos where you don't have the tool to open it, and I wouldn't regulate it myself. I've regulated my, Vostok Amphibia, but I wouldn't regulate, my, Explorer. But yeah, take it to a authorized Rolex dealer or a good watchmaker, and they'll be able to regulate it for you. It's not, you know, heavy duty watchmaking. It's solid watchmaking. A good watchmaker will do it properly. Let's see. Why not? First, check if more than regulation will be necessary. Well, okay, Renee. Renee makes a point. If it's losing 3 seconds a day, it may not be that it needs regulation. It may be that there's grit in the pivot, or there's although consistently losing three could be regulation, but it could also be, yeah, something off. Renee has a good point. But then again, if you take it to an authorized dealer for regulation, they'll at least check that kind of stuff because they probably have a list of things. Okay, if it's running slow, here are the top 5 things that cause the, XYZ movement, 33, 30, whatever, to run slow. And then they'll check those things as part of the regulation. And if they find something, trust me, they will let you know if you need a service. They will say, "Oh, we were regulating your watch and we found a dead mouse inside." No, you know what I mean, that kind of thing. Um, and they will send you a nice letter and they will say, "Yeah, it's going to cost you more, sadly, but you'll get a better performing watch back for it." But yeah, so if you take it to an AD for regulation, they'll take care of Renee's point about making sure that it's not just regulation that's the problem. They'll make sure that it's only the regulation, because no AD is going to let a Rolex leave that had a real problem that you can show them a receipt and say, "Hey, you could have caught it." No, that ain't going to happen. They may charge you for it downstream. If they check it and there's nothing wrong, then they'll just regulate it. But if they check it and they find something, trust me, you'll pay for it. Okay. What type of person needs their watch to be more accurate than 3 seconds a day? Well, Robert, frankly, if my watch is 3 seconds fast, I'm cool with that. COSC is +6 -4, because and Metas, what Omega currently uses, is +5 -0. So because they recognize it's better to be fast than slow. So 3 seconds slow, I can understand how it can bug people. As you point out, it's not gonna, you're not gonna miss a train for 3 seconds a day if you reset your watch on a daily basis. See, some people don't want to do that, or reset it at least once a week. But if it's running 3 seconds slow a day, it might run slower at certain times based on position of the watch and how I'm wearing it or whatever. It would bug me if it was running slow. Running fast is I could handle a few seconds, but running slow, I can see why. I could see why it's bugging, pal. I really can. I mean, nobody minds fast. Nobody minds it if you're early, you know? So I can see why it bugs them to be a little slow, because you definitely don't want to be a lot slow, but a little slow in a precision piece irks. We're a little fast in a precision piece. You can go, "Hey, it's running hot," or okay, I'm ahead of the crowd, or what. You can rationalize it being fast, but if it's slow, then it's obviously not even keeping the time you need. Because in our world today, it is better to be a little fast than a little slow. Um, in fact, being slow is an epithet, right? Picky person, pal. Yes, picky person. Or, well, this was running a little slow this morning when I looked at it, and I realized it wasn't that it was running slow, is that when I had set it to follow up to the minute instead of going beyond and backing up to it. Because some watches have a little bit of play. So if you you set beyond and then come back to the time you want as opposed to coming up to the time you want because there might still be a little play there and then the watch will appear slow even though it's not. And so I had to reset the hands this morning and I'm pleased with it. Now it is running the way it's supposed to. But yeah, if you think a watch is running slow, it can bug you. It can itch. It can be like, a little bit of sand in your shoe. I like my watches. Renee says, I like my watches running fast. Everything up to 10 seconds a day is fine. Exactly. You can tolerate fast. At least it's not going to make you late to anything. Wow, you guys don't chill much. Ah, Robert. Well, in my case, my day job, like I said, I'm a journalist. I no longer have hourly deadlines. I mean, in the old timey days, you had to have stuff up at certain times of the day. But I do still have daily deadlines that I have to honor because you have things to do. But then if you have daily deadlines and you're juggling multiple balls and you got calendar alerts coming up, yeah, if you're going to wear a watch, it should be accurate, especially considering that $100 G-Shock is spot on accurate. Actually, the G-Shock I had, the one that I just picked up recently, I think I paid $50 for it because it's just the digital display and it's solar and so it never needs batteries and it's radio controlled, which means I never need to set it for whatever time zone I'm in anywhere on the planet. Um, I could wear that watch and it will always tell me the exact time to the second, but it's not fun. Or it depends if I was going dirt biking in the mud, I'd wear it and then it would be fun, but then it wouldn't be fun because of the watch. It'd be fun because I'm able to take it someplace fun and not worry about it. But if I was going, say, for example, to the opera, I would wear my Zenith Open Heart El Primero chronograph on the black alligator strap because I want to look gorgeous. And I know that they're not going to get it from here. So I wear a nice suit and a nice watch. And my Grail, in fact, I'm almost pretty much at peak watch. I can't even think of a new one to buy right now beyond exotic collectibles. I can't think of anything mainstream. If you could think of something mainstream that I haven't done a video on or haven't mentioned in a video, let me know. I might buy it. But yeah, that's why what you're doing, the application, as an engineer would say, the application space is critical to the selection of the device used to address it. So my OP is the only slow watch I have. Yeah, then definitely get it regulated because it's going to just bug the hell out of you that one of the most expensive watches, the most valuable watches in your collection is one of your slowest. It would bug me. Yeah, take it to an. It's going to cost you. It's going to cost you, a couple hundred just to have it regulated. And but then again, if it needs servicing, you're better off having it serviced because it'll lose value completely if it breaks. But you're going to be in between $100 to $600, I'm guessing, for around $100 to $200 for regulation, depending on the dealer, to upwards of 5, 6 for a service or more. I paid 1,200 for my oyster quartz that I bought and sold, but if it wasn't working properly, it wasn't worth any money, and the date was slipping funny, and I sent it in, and they did it a full everything, the full Monty on it, and it cost me 1,200. But then again, they had to have a watchmaker and an electronics technician look at it because it had both a jeweled Swiss escapement and a temperature compensated quartz driven motor. So, you pay your ticket, you take your ride, right? Apart from wearing Grand Seiko for a long time, well, Grand Seiko, Lexus, right? They always start. They run beautifully. They're accused of not having enough character. Same argument that Grand Seiko, but Grand Seiko makes fantastic watches, and the faces are gorgeous to die for. Like I said, they just need some unique design DNA that is visible from a distance to make them more identifiable in the luxury market. That's why Richard Mille is doing so well. You could see them from frickin' orbit and know that that person is wearing a Richard Mille. And in a world where flash is important, unique and interesting looking watches get traction. And Grand Seiko, if you look close, in fact, the closer you look, the more you see it's a beautiful piece. with tremendous amount of workmanship, workwomanship, workpersonship in it. Um, but you can't tell that from across the room. And a lot of people who spend $6,000, $7,000, $8,000, $10,000, $15,000 on a watch, they want you to recognize it from across the room. Even if they're not just showing off. I mean, if you got friends and you guys all have cars and you pull up in the new Mustang, you want your friends to admire your taste and your purchase, not that you're showing off to, well, you are showing off to your friends, but you're not rubbing their face in it in the sense that you dislike them and you want to lord over them. You're like, hey, you're my friends, enjoy my purchase of this cool thing. And then they'll show you their cool thing and you have a, discussion about your cool things. Um, and that works with watches too. So if you have a watch that your friends don't recognize, or I shouldn't say friends, acquaintances, people who are potential friends and acquaintances don't recognize as being cool, right? For example, a lot of Americans don't get that. If you buy, say, for example, a top of the line Volkswagen Golf GTI, there are like maybe three things, as the Germans would do, three things that would tell you that it's a top of the line GTI. They might have a badge on it or might not. The owner literally might not have the badge, so you don't know what kind of car it is, because a lot of people are very low key in Germany in that sense. You'd tell by the exhaust or something. But like from a design point of view, it might have a red pinstripe along the bumper and nice rims, and that'd be the only way you knew that had like 2 liters more under the hood or whatever. Um, Subtle design cues, but some things don't work for subtle. And watches, I mean, they're jewelry with motors. They're little cars you wear on your wrist. Some people want that to be known, like I said, even if it's not in a show offy sense, but just in a friendly, competitive sense. And if all your friends are, balling around with OPs and Explorer 2s and Explorers and, maybe the odd Tag Heuer Carrera 2 or something like that, you want something that they're gonna say, if they know the Seiko, the Grand Seiko, they're gonna say cool. But if they don't know Grand Seiko, you're gonna spend the evening explaining what Grand Seiko means to your friends, which could be either a great conversation or a night of hell. We're almost at the end of the hour. Let's see, my watch maker charges 25 euros. Well, yeah. And if you like them and you trust them, Renee, take them there. Take the roll. I mean, I would take the Rolex to somebody like that and they could do the job. But some people don't want to trust, a $10,000 watch to a $25 regulation. They feel better paying 100 for it. Couple hundred to regulate by a G-Shock instead. Well, it depends on the watch, right? My watchmaker charges, okay, Alex. Oh, Quarter's Eye. What do you think of Minasa? I think they're a tool manufacturer, but they now produce watches. They use off the shelf. Okay, well, you know what? I'm going to look into them and I'll bring them up I'll write it down right now. I'm going to bring it up at the next show. And I'll mention Quarter's Eye and we'll bring them up, because the nice thing about a company and other Minasa, these micro brands, they're able to punch above their weight now, because that goes back a little bit to what we were saying with watchmaking and movements and System 51 and machining. Even when we went, a few years back, when we went from hand tooling on everything, pardon me, hand tooling on everything to CNC machine stuff, that changed the face of what. Once upon a time, you cut your gear teeth by hand, you know? Um, so today, you're buying, say, for example, a 2824 or a 7750, even a clone from Solita or from Seagull or from someone. Those movements, even the cheaper ones, are made to tolerances that were not achievable 50 years ago. tolerances that the best boys had to have a team of people with a table full of microscopes and a week to work on it to put out that level of fit and finish. And you can get approachable levels of fit and finish like that with CNC, and then with some light hand finishing, or even depending on how much you're putting into your CNC machine, you can come out with some really sophisticated stuff now. So yeah, it's I think Minaza could have some really nice watches. I would say that they couldn't charge more than 2,000 euros for them, because if you're making good third party watches or micro brand watches with third party movements, in other words, ETA or Solida movements in them, if you want to stick to the Swiss, you can command about 1,500 bucks, give or take, for a good, well-made watch with a off-the-shelf Swiss movement. You can get away with about 15, and that's where a lot of the mainstream is, right? Um, more than 2,000, you start getting the realm where either you have to do something to that off-the-shelf movement, like IWC. They still use the Value 7750, but they finish it and they work it to a level that it's worth the money that you're paying for this watch. Or you go in-house, which is why everybody at the high end is going in-house, because if you can make as good a watch with an off-the-shelf movement and rework it, like for example, the Tudor Black Bay, the first generation, the Heritage. I have one. I have a video on it. That's got an ETA, modified ETA. They changed a lot in it, and yeah, I'd say once you get to that 2,000 to the gray zone between 2 and 3,000, that's where you start seeing the handoff between off the shelf movements and in-house movements, because you have to show the value somewhere. I think the use of off-the-shelf movements really hurt them. Well, see, that's the thing, Quarter's Eye, is yeah, you can't charge more than 2,000 bucks for a based watch. I mean, it's not a like what I was saying about this, is that's why this is worth about it's still worth about 1,000 and change, because this is about what you're gonna get from a micro brand. Nice case, nice face, off-the-shelf movement. Um, and you're not gonna get more than 2,000 for one of them, because once you go past 2,000, you're getting into the realm of companies like Oris or Mido, that make some really nice mechanical watches. And then like I said, once you're past the 3,000 range, you're in the realm of definitely in gray market in-house movements. Frederic Constance in-house. Let's see. Oh, just like Oris, right? They sell what? They sell for over 7,000. No wonder they're getting hurt. They're setting. There's no wonder they're getting hurt. So yeah, no one's going to. I shouldn't say no one, because maybe what was I saying about IWC? Maybe they're refinishing maybe they're refinishing the movements to a degree that makes it worth the money, but 7,000's a big jump, a big jump. I'm going to do some research on them, and yeah, let's talk about this at the next episode. We've reached pretty much the top of the hour, so unless someone's got something important to say, I'm going to go ahead and close out the episode. Yeah, well, Navi is before you go, the Navi World. I've got a Navi World timer myself. It's value based. It's but they don't finish it a lot, but it is put in a nice case with a nice presentation and a nice face, and the other. I have a video on the Navid timer, world timer. It's definitely a really nice piece. But a lot of watches are based on the 7750. Like I said, IWC is the Longines is a 7750 with a column wheel instead of a cam movement. So you can rework a movement a lot, and add value. But still, once you rework, I don't think you can rework a movement past for $5,000 value unless you're doing some heavy work to the case as well, or maybe using some precious metals. So, Chrono Swiss balance retrograde. That's going to be cool. Hey, Raul. Oh, thank you, thank you. Well, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and extend a little bit longer. I won't run it too long because I like to keep these to an hour so we have something to talk about every week. But hey, Shane, just sub. Sorry you missed the show. That's okay. I'm going to leave it open for like 10 more minutes. I normally close at the top of the hour, but I noticed we picked up a few more viewers, so we'll answer one or two more questions and we'll close everything out. I'm going to have to block some of these. Some people keep coming in and leaving weird sexual things. Don't click on any of this crap that these people are putting on the site, please. But yeah, when it comes to watches and watchmaking, it really is a taste thing. It's all up to you, what you really want, what you want to have on your wrist. What you're the one who's going to be looking at it the whole time. You can buy it because you like showing it to your friends or showing it to people, but you have to like it because you're sharing your enjoyment of it, not you know, not showing it off. You're showing it to share it as opposed to showing it to just like be the, monkey with the brightest mud rubbed into your fur. So let's see. I don't see any new questions. So I am gonna go ahead then. Well, we're already seven after. I'm gonna end the show for today, but I'm going to do a look into the Menage. And if anybody has hey, no problem, Wonder Tang guy. I'm sorry, but I am gonna bail on the episode because we are at the end of the hour. And I haven't eaten yet. Let's see. The Balance Retrograde is an awesome watch. The watch is coming directly. Very cool. I'm very glad. If you have the beads race quarters eye, that is a nice piece. A really, really nice piece. And Shane, you feel nice wearing them. I once gave a person a watch because they were about to go to a job interview, and I like to think it helped give them a little boost in their shoes to, to sail through it because they got the job. This hobby is like going for the mammoths, but getting the goats. Well, it depends on, what your definition is, right? Because even something like this Universal Genève Senna, it's 77 value 7750 inside, day date, chronograph, waterproof, water resistant. It's nothing is waterproof. Water resistant, screw down pushers, interesting look. I mean, even at a loss, I can sell this for several $100, which for a lot of people is still serious money. I mean, I talk often about watches that cost 6 and 7,000 euros on this show that I own. But the bottom line is, I also recognize the fact that not everybody can, own a Omega Globemaster. And the other side of that coin is my entire collection. You could sell my entire collection and buy one Royal Oak Chrono. There's always a bigger fish. And that's another reason I don't mind talking about my collection, because I talk about my collection so that you know what waters I do swim in, because I do believe that there is such a thing as too much watch. If I started wearing, say, for example, a Royal Oak, right, a $50,000 chronograph, first I'd have to worry about being mugged on the street because I don't travel in circles where I have bodyguards or my friends have bodyguards or the neighborhood I'm in is guarded 24/7 by a gated community or whatever. Walking around with that kind of real estate on your wrist is begging for trouble in some cases. Your mileage may vary. Also, the people I hang out with, I myself don't make the kind of money to throw around for that. My philosophy on watch collecting is you should spend about 10% of your investable income Like you would spend it in gold instead of buying gold and, precious metals as that 5 to 10% of your investment portfolio, spend it on watches and wear them. So for the average person, a professional, I should say, I shouldn't say person because a lot of people, I'll put it this way. I make less than the overseas income cap for tax purposes, which is 110,000, I think 105. See, I don't know because I don't make that much money, but I make more than 20,000 a year. So I'm comfortable in the 5,000 to 7,000 watch range at the upper end. But there are people who would look at that and say that's nothing. That's no money at all to spend on a watch. So everything is based on perspective, right? A $600 watch is expensive to some people. A $600,000 watch is expensive to some people. A $6,000 watch is expensive to me, but I can swing it if I save a couple of months and sell something. Your watches started loving watches too. No, but Shane, that's good because then you can let her borrow some of your pieces and you can get her nice pieces as gifts. Now you always know what to give her as a gift if you're stuck, you know? So it's okay. It's an expensive hobby, but it's a hobby that has equity. I wouldn't say watches are a way to invest, but watches are a way to retain value. Let's see. Universal Geneva makes very, Quarter's Eye. You should definitely look at my interview I did with Alex Leto, the last episode I did. He talks about his Universal Genevs, and we have a couple of pictures of some really beautiful vintage Universal Genevs that we do close ups during the conversation in the video. It's definitely worth watching. And he'll talk about how he almost bought the company Polyot. Do you think the micro brands, Raul, do you think the micro brands watches going for Chinese movements are losing the game? No, actually, I don't, because the micro brands using the Chinese movements are smart enough not to overcharge, right? That new Baltic with the micro rotor movement is under $1,000, right? Under $1,000 is a good price point for a mechanical watch with a well-made case from a company that's taking that Chinese movement and at least regulating it and making sure that it runs properly before they put it in the case because they have a name on it, and like in the case of Baltic. So I don't think they're losing the game with Chinese movements. I think if they try to overprice, if they've got a Chinese movement in it and they're charging more than $1,000, they're playing a game with you. But if you've got, say, for example, a micro rotor or a tourbillon from a micro brand, you couldn't get you couldn't get a tourbillon for less than $25,000 out of a European company, or actually from anybody. And now you can get a tourbillon for $500. And if you buy it from the right micro brand, it actually looks decent and would be something you'd feel good wearing on your wrist and not just some gaudy piece of crap that barely functions. They really have come a long way and they're getting better every day. And like I said, there's no such thing as a bad CNC machine. The parts are made well. The QC problems are in the putting together and all. And that's where the micro brands come in. They at least make sure that the movements that they're buying are running properly before they put them in the cases. Let's see. We share, oh, Shane, he's talking about his wife being a watch fan. We share the experience, but now she knows how much they cost. Well, see, that's when you start making the value proposition. Get a nice safe and say, well, honey, we're not going to make a profit on these, but they do represent a solid value like jewelry. In worst case scenario, we're going to get 50 cents on the dollar for these watches, right? And if we buy them on the gray market, we'll be able to get maybe 70 cents on the dollar back, and we keep them in this safe and we insure them, and it becomes a value cash. I wouldn't call it investment. You're not going to gain a lot of value, but if we needed to hypothetically, go somewhere in a heartbeat, you're going to get a lot farther with a wrist covered with really nice watches than you will with a pocket full of credit cards that might not work, or the zombie apocalypse, and everybody's trading gold bars like, I've seen that before. but they'll take that Rolex off your hands for a loaf of bread. But, yeah, make the value store proposition to your wife. She knows how much they're worth and she knows how much they resell for. So point out if you turn it into a real collection and you take care of it and insure it, then it becomes an asset that the family can then use. And if they don't need the money from the watches, they can pass that watch collection on to the kids. And that is a great argument. The women of the household respect legacy. And in the old timey days in Europe, some families would actually buy expensive stuff as heirlooms to pass down as family magnets to help keep family cohesion through the years because they had something to protect. So you could make the argument to your wife that a watch collection now is the beginning of an heirloom that the family will either use in time of need or add to as it comes around. So yeah, nothing but net there. Let's see. Pole Yacht's a great company, and yeah, what he says, it's an interesting story. You should definitely check it out. We got a couple of close-ups of some Pole Yachts in there, but you could pretty much see a lot of Pole Yacht pictures around. They're easy to get watches, but they do make good watches, and it's an interesting company and a really interesting story. Let's see. Oh, we're done. I've bought 3 watches. It's delightful to watch her change taste over time. Her taste change over time. Well, that's the nice thing about watching a new collector. My friend Rob, who we're doing all of these inexpensive watches, he's going through those waves, and he's currently at the end of that wave of let me buy all the cool, inexpensive watches I can afford. Invictas and the like. He owns a couple of Breitlings, and now he's recognizing that maybe he should start adding to the top end of his shelf as opposed to the easy to acquire pieces. So watching someone go through that watch collection journey is a joy. If you're a watch collector, if you're not, it's frightening as they go higher and higher. My wife wasn't interested in watches until I showed her a Ulysses Nardin Michelangelo with diamonds. Now she and loves watches too. Well, see, Ulysses Nardin is a very, very underrated company. Their fit and finish, their work, their horology is excellent. I would say they're on par with the Triumvirate as far as watches go. The Freak is true horological masterpiece. Um, so yeah, she has good taste. Tell her I said she has good taste. If her first love was a Ulysses Nardin, Michelangelo, yeah, she's got good taste. But then she's married you. Let's see. The collection is in the will. There you go. See, when she started, she hated my Pam bronze, and now she's got a 111 and she wants that. I have a video on the 111. You should check it out. I sold my 111, but I had a nice piece, really nice piece, very classic piece. So I let the show run a little bit longer because we had a lot of last minute guests that I wanted to greet and show that I care about. I care about all of you. I love you all. If it weren't for you all out there, I'd just be some guy sitting here talking to himself about watches. So thank you. And please subscribe. It's really, really important. You all take care and happy holidays, Kwanzaa, Festivus, Hanukkah, whatever satisfies your personal being. Take care, everybody.